Hello, Sherlock with Elementary Airsoft, and today we'll be taking a look at the NPO AEG VKS 94. This will be more so a bit of an assembly video and sort of general overview and some thoughts as I'm looking at and putting together the parts here. I do have a separate video on the gearbox itself, and I do also plan on putting out some videos on like a complete review, but that's after I've had some time to field them. I know there isn't as much good info in English. NPO does have a pretty good series of videos showing assembly, disassembly, the conversions and stuff on it, but I figured I'd go at least here and talk a little bit about the overall experience with ordering. This did come directly from NPO AEG in Russia. At their suggestion, it was shipped disassembled, which is perfectly fine. I'm more than capable of assembling them. It did still come with a manual for it. Manual is, it's written in Russian as well as in English, and it's honestly pretty good and pretty well written. The pictures are sort of make me think of a little bit like a newspaper print one. There's some, I forget the effect that's done to them, but it's easy enough to sort of see what's going on. But with that all being said, I guess let's dive into it. These did somehow successfully make it to me within about a month or a little over from Russia here in these COVID times. So that's somewhat impressive, actually. And this will sort of be an English with color commentary review and sort of instructions on how to assemble the VKS 94 as well as the 9A91 and 9A91U, because I did also get the parts for that. But those differences are pretty simple. So first off, we have our receiver here, which is one nice block of stamped and welded metal. What I like to do is put our wire through the bottom first for the gearbox. It'll just be easier than trying to sneak it past our outer barrel setup. Spin inner barrel into outer barrel. Like so, and it notches the, I guess, the wings of it. I do believe, like, if you wanted to replace the hop-up unit, you could. I will also note here that there is no screw on the front end of the hop-up unit. I thought that was a defect, and I did reach out, and they said, nope, it can't have the screw there because of how it slides into here, it wouldn't fit. So, just so you know that. I would have liked to seen like a smaller tab on the back of the hop-up arm. I think like LCT has that on some of their V3 hop-up arms. I don't know if that would also interfere with stuff or not, but it would potentially allow for easier adjustment. But we're going to then slide this in here. This is just going to slide through, I guess, the outer barrel, which is this chunk here. Front. Just want to make sure that my wires are out of the way. There we go. And we're going to pull this, oops, shoot. Didn't want to separate my barrel here. Put it back out. It's hard because you have to sort of sneak it past that tab on the hop-up unit. There is zero play whatsoever between outer barrel and the hop-up unit. There's no wiggling going on. So that's really good as a person that's slightly very obsessed with accuracy. Just because you want to remove every opportunity for error in your system that you can. going to kind of stand it out. There we go. So that's all the way forward. So now to easier facilitate putting the gearbox in, it's important to note that this isn't quite, well, it's a standard V3 gearbox and standard V3 motor cage, but our selector system is a little bit different. So we're going to make sure that our little pin here from the trigger transfer bar is lined up here. That's going to be our safe position, so this isn't going to go anywhere. And your selector is up. That's going to be the easiest position to insert our gearbox here. I'm just going to feed that through. It's a little bit harder to do with the motor cage on, or with the motor installed, but just going to wiggle around, make sure we're home there. Taking a look, just to check my alignment here. Yeah, needed to be a little bit further forward, and then she drops in. Then what we're going to do is I'm going to slide this forward, and then we use our conical screw here, and that's going to go in there. I believe this is a M4 screw for anybody wondering. I will note too, if you watch my previous video on the gearbox, I have installed a screw at the back of it to hold the bearing guide in position. And that does not interfere with any of the internals. So that screw locks the gearbox in place. And now we're going to go ahead and secure the inner barrel, or well, inner barrel, outer barrel. So here, you just push back against the gearbox, and if your unit ships with the outer barrel already installed, you may need to loosen this large screw up front beforehand. Now here too is where one of the spots where I think they could have done a little bit better design-wise. They could have put like some sort of an index, because currently here, if you look in a hop-up, I can freely rotate the barrel here. So, you know, if you're installing this, it's very important to make sure to take your time and get it so it's perfectly centered. And then when you've done that, you can go ahead and tighten down this screw. And that's going to hold the outer barrel in place, and the outer barrel holds the inner barrel. And this whole system pushes nice and snug up against the gearbox and helps lock the gearbox in place, which is honestly really nice. It's a rather simple but somehow somewhat elegant system. Now here too, just talking batteries, well, this is a 3-cell, but you might be able to, this is a 2-cell, that's also a 3-cell. Oh, this is a puffy 3-cell. That is not very safe. You might be able to slip a 2-cell 1200 milliamp buffer tube battery in like this, in the handguard cavity. Otherwise, if you're 3-cell, it'd be better to go split and around the barrel / suppressor. Okay, so that's everything assembled gearbox wise. So now we have two different roads to go down. I'm going to start by initially showing you VSK, or the 9A91, 9A91U. The only real difference there is if we're doing the 9A91U, instead of using long barrel, we'd use the shorter inner barrel, shorter outer barrel that came in this package. And the only difference between the 9A91 and 9A91U is when you use the suppressor on the 9A91, and you still keep the long barrel set up. On the U, you don't use a suppressor, you just put on this nut, which will hold your handguard in position, and you use the shorter barrel set. Both of these will install pretty much the same. So for your top cover and folding stock here, which I will comment, This folding stock, very solid. No wobbling to it once it clicks into place. This is a nice heavy gauge steel. The folding buttstock here just uses basically this natural spring detent of the metal to lock it there. Once again, no real play there, very solid. So interesting enough, this slides inside, or essentially inside. Oh. Got to clean up my wires here. Slides inside the lower frame. Then down here we have 3 screws, or 3 screw holes that are threaded into essentially the top receiver cover. And there, if we're using the pistol grip, aka the 9A91, 9A91U installation, we're going to install screws here and here. Then you put on your grip. Then we have this one last metal tab, and that's where your last screw goes in, and then you can put in your motor grip screw. And it's really that simple, but I'm going to install it in the VSK94 configuration. So I have just the normal dust cover, top cover. This is also going to just slide into position there. Oops. And then we're going to put in, these are also M4 screws. So unlike, an AK or the VSS, you can't really remove the top cover easily in the field or anything like that without stripping the gun down. So it's relatively sealed up once you put it together. And here we're going to, oops, going to use actually the smaller Allen key because the angle is too much. And once again too, it'd probably be a lot easier to do this if you didn't have the motor installed already. That's in place. So we install all 3 first. Now we can put on our stock, which this just slides in like so. And then here we have our motor grip screw, which is a giant flathead. Good ways to recording. And we have this other longer M4 bolt that's honestly here I think is a little bit dumb. A, it's silver, B, it's socket head, and they have reamed out the area where it slots in on the stock, so I feel like a conical one would have been a better choice. Oops. This is a side slider. Always be careful when threading your screws, or putting in screws in general, most airsoft stuff, especially you just don't want to cross thread anything. Just cause heaps of trouble for yourself down the road. Almost there. Then we're going to snug this up. So the stock is held in place by 2 screws, which you'd think wouldn't really be that sturdy, but we'll take a look at it here in a second. Okay, so we have this screw, And this screw is the only two things holding the stock on, but there is no flex or play. We'll finish assembly here and I can give you a couple of observations and other initial impressions on it. So handguard goes over. This part always gets me because you got to get the wires in this cutout through the side of the threads here, and somehow I screw it up every time. I mean, it looks. Is there a way you could choose it? No. The Dean's plug likes to get caught on the front lip of the handguard. I think it's usually the source of my problems. Oh, and there we go. I think. Nope, not quite. There we go. Now that's in the slot. And that just slides into place. And then you can put on your suppressor. Normally this does come apart in two parts. So I guess normally you would just have this bit threaded on, and you would just basically remove the suppressor from this set of threads when you need to change or install your batteries. Is their standard recommended install. But if you go with like 1000 milliamp, you could probably fit a 3-cell in here, or a 1200 milliamp 2-cell could probably squeeze in there, one of the buffer tube type ones. So this screws on, that locks on your handguard, that's not moving anywhere, no wobble, no play. And in here, this little window, you have your hop-up arm to adjust, so you can adjust it from the outside. Pulling back your mock, or your mock bolt, I guess, only goes back about 1/2 inch, and you can see the back end of the hop-up, but it really doesn't give you access to anything. Okay, so I'll put my suppressor on. It's assembled. Sorry, in video editing, it turns out that I lost part of the previous clip, so I'll try and pick up back where I left off. And we had just gone through assembly of the NPO VSK 94, and I was going to talk a little bit about some of the overall sort of fit, finish, durability aspects, and talk a little bit about, in particular, all the plastic hardware on it. So I think first off, let's talk about the plastic. So here I have a couple of pieces from the conversion kit to make it the 9A91 or 9A91U. But it's just a little bit easier to look at this separate piece. So I'm going to zoom in here, make sure that I'm on camera. So this is a separate motor grip. And in here we can see a couple of really interesting things. Let's try and get some extra light, see if that helps. So first off, you notice we have this grid pattern, and in the grid pattern, if you look closely, you can see these horizontal hash lines from 3D printing, or that look like 3D printing. So a lot of the places and a lot of older views or stuff I've seen people mention is like, oh yeah, all their plastic hardware is 3D printed. And I think some of that comes from telltale marks like this, and maybe in fact earlier ones were. But then here too, in this grid pattern, we can see in the corners that it's filled in from the castings of it. So basically this is a cast piece that's cast out of a silicone mold. Let's see if I can find any good spots for you here. So on this side, you can see that basically the negative that would fill in these little voids, this waffle pattern, basically parts of the waffle iron there are coming off and wearing out as this mold is used repeated times. Other really good tells that this is a cast part. So you're looking here, you can see where the dye is mixed, or the resin isn't quite perfectly mixed, and we have slight like marble effects. You can also see that here on the stock. You can see some of the marbling. So it's definitely a cast product, and it's cast, my bet is from a silicone or fiberglass type mold. But on the inside, here's where things get also pretty interesting. The inside texture here is 3D printed. So that's, again, once can be maybe a bit of how they get that association that all their stuff is 3D printed. And that also is not true. It's a 3D, what in my bet of what happens is they print or 3D print a thin shell basically to fill the specific interior that you need for your motor cage and stuff. And then they put that probably on another piece and part of the billet, and that goes in the mold, and then it's over molded with this plastic. And that's how you get this this type of a finish and how it looks this way. Now, in terms of durability and how strong it is, I think it's pretty good. I don't know specifically what materials or whatever they're using. There is metal reinforcement pieces for, where the screws would go in. So that's all good. But yeah, otherwise, like I said, durability-wise, pretty good. The fact that you can still see the 3D printed tells, probably from the original master, that they made the master, they sanded it, they polished it, and then they cast their mold off of that, but you can't clean up these little interior squares, so that's what I'm betting is going on there. And yeah, it'd be nice to see, like actually large batch production molds like you'd see from, in general, other manufacturers or perhaps bigger manufacturers where, be a lot cleaner, better finished plastic. I can tell you it's highly likely that, in the real steel world, the actual ones, aside of maybe prototypes probably would have used something like this, but, actual production runs would certainly use actual castings. Or, not actual castings because these are castings, but, castings from a steel mold or a more durable thing. So, plastic is good, but I wouldn't say that it looks, or the quality of the part I think is good, but the visual appearance certainly comes a bit lacking in some regards. But and especially the fit and finish, like here, where there's mold lines here, you can tell it was sanded on the handguard. Especially down here, there was a big mold line that you could tell was sanded, or where the mold didn't quite leak and the stuff leaked out. So some of it's pretty rough. I mean, I might come back and touch it back up and then basically progressively work finer and finer to get it, re-smooth the sort of the original mold finish. But I don't know entirely if it's worth it. To an extent, these are replicas of Russian guns, and generally in my head, it's less about, the smooth finishes. It's, any military mass-produced weapon, it isn't about perfect finishes and tolerances. It needs to get the job done, and, if it's a bit rough around the edges, to me, that just makes it perhaps a little bit more authentic. Butt pad here, it isn't plastic, it's a cast rubber, and it looks probably like it was over-molded around something as well, so it does still have some squish, but I don't think it would have enough, for actual recoil, because these indentations here don't go all the way through or in very far, so it just doesn't have as much shock absorbing capability. But this is airsoft, so we don't really care about that. So that's really the big story on NPO's plastic. And to take another step back, and I know I've rambled on a lot about their plastic, but to an extent, it kind of makes a bit of sense that they're doing it this way. I know they aren't as big of a manufacturer, they're a smaller company, and the thing is, if you look through their history, they continuously basically release improvements on the different weapons. Like if you look at their VSS, I think it's had 6 or 8 different versions as they've improved and improved. So if they're constantly driving for improvement, they can't end up being a smaller company. They can't keep on just getting or making new, really expensive steel moldings when they aren't going to output the volume on any of those runs. So maybe someday we'll see, more improvement there. But it's not bad, I think, from a functional and durability standpoint. But it's not, I would say, like, visually and other quality-wise, it's not quite up to the price point it is. Compared to other, like a standard M4 or, like a nice M4 from like Crytek or ICS or, like those guys, like you're paying anywhere from like $250 to $400 for a gun, and here you're paying probably at least like $400-ish. And just the polymer, like I said, the quality of the plastic is fine. I don't have any qualms there. It's just the finish on it is not the best. But you are getting something that's unique and or different that no other, well, I shouldn't say no other company makes, but they just have a different way of going around it and achieving their goals. Okay. Whew. Sorry for the long rant on plastic. Going on, talking about other construction features, other accuracy things of the gun. I think one thing, if I remember correctly from reading or seeing some stuff on the actual one, semi and auto are inverted from the real steel. That's just a thing of how the V3 gearbox works and how this toggles. Certainly, if you're using something like a Titan in here, you could probably program it otherwise. Just basically flip which one, when semi and auto occurred, but they have the indentations, nice fill on the trades and markings here. So again, I think their serial is related probably to production. Like this 19, I'm guessing this might have been made in 2019, maybe. All the welds, I think the welds here are a bit bigger and more, I guess, blobby than the real steel. I think they're smaller and thinner and might be more, once again, finding pictures and good accurate reference of this, or like this particular gun is a bit more difficult, but realistically everything here is honestly very sturdy. There's no like wobbles or anything. I don't have a problem with how sturdy the stock is attached or any of that. It's a very, very well built and well thought gun, and just from looking at this as well as the VSS, yeah, they're still sticking to standard sets of internals, the standard V3 gearbox and that, standard V3 on, well, okay, aside of the selector linkages, realistically both of these guns are a bit modified or custom to NPO, but really they're sticking with a standard thing, but in terms of other assembly features, receivers and body-wise, they seem to adhere closer to the real steel world. And then in terms of other things, like if earlier here, watching how the hop-up and stuff assembled, is like, really they went back to square one and said, well, instead of just copying everybody else that's copied Tokyo Marui, it's just like, well, we just need to bring this hop-up close to theirs. Like, well, we can just, you just push it in and then tighten the set screws. Like, some of that stuff is honestly really nice to see. I guess, resolving, or I guess not resolving, but it's just a really simple solution to a problem that doesn't need to be that hard. So, yeah, it's well made, strong. I will certainly put together a follow-up video covering it after using it. I do want to put these through their paces stock for a while. Personally, I was thinking about potentially looking at HPAing this and making it so it could dynamically convert with and without the suppressor, some stuff there. But we'll see. It's definitely fit in pretty stiff, and they're also quite heavy. They're made out of a nice heavy stamped sheet metal. But there you go. That's the VSK 94, and look forward to doing doing some work with this in the future. And I think that's about all. Well, I guess real quick, I'm not sure if I covered this. So this is the 9A91 or 9A91 or 9A91U stock setup. Once again here too, this is really well made in terms of how and where things lock in. Very little play. There's like no wobble on the stock. It's all plenty thick steel here. We're talking 1.5 millimeters thick on the stamped here, so that's plenty strong. It looks pretty thin, but honestly, real strong. Positive retention, but I intend mostly to use it with this stock. I may throw this one on at some point, but for starters, this is how I'm going to stick with it. Yeah, so thank you for watching, and if you're curious as to the internals and stuff, I have a separate video going over their gearbox and taking a look at that. Overall, so far I've been pretty happy with these guys. Hopefully, when there's less COVID and more fields and stuff open, we'll get more time to actually use these and put them through their paces. Probably sometime 2021. So thank you.